The first white orchid struck the polished marble floor with a soft, heartbreaking sound. Then another. Then an entire arrangement worth 3 days of sleepless work toppled sideways, scattering roses, peonies, eucalyptus, and lilies across the grand entrance of City Hall's crystal ballroom. Laughter spread faster than the flowers. Some guests covered their mouths. Others didn't bother. Camera flashes exploded in every direction. Standing in the middle of it all was Emma Brooks, clutching an empty floral crate with trembling hands, while trying desperately not to cry. Across the room, one man watched in complete silence. He didn't laugh. He didn't move. He simply observed. And unlike everyone else, he noticed who had actually caused the flowers to fall. 48 hours earlier, Emma had believed this gala would save her business. The Brooks Flower House sat on a quiet corner where old brick buildings leaned toward each other as though sharing secrets. The paint around the windows had begun peeling. The wooden sign her grandmother carved decades ago had faded beneath years of rain and sunlight. Inside, however, every inch of the shop remained alive. Buckets overflowed with fresh lavender. Sunflowers reached toward the morning light. Tiny glass jars held sprigs of baby's breath waiting to become part of someone's happiest memory. Emma preferred it that way. People often overlooked the building. They never overlooked the flowers. She stood behind the work table tying ivory ribbon around a bouquet when her assistant, Lily, burst through the front door carrying an envelope. "Emma!" She was nearly out of breath. "It came!" Emma barely looked up. What came? The mayor's office. Emma stopped tying the ribbon. Slowly, she reached for the envelope. Her name appeared neatly printed across the front. She unfolded the letter carefully. As her eyes scanned the page, Lily bounced excitedly beside her. "Well?" Emma blinked twice. They accepted the proposal. Lily squealed loud enough to startle the shop cat sleeping near the window. "You got it!" Emma laughed, the sound almost unfamiliar after weeks of worrying. The city's annual Charity Garden Gala was the most prestigious event of the year. Business leaders, artists, television personalities, donors, even international guests attended. Winning the floral contract meant more than money. It meant recognition. Lily wrapped Emma in an enthusiastic hug. Your grandmother would be dancing right now. Emma smiled toward an old black and white photograph hanging beside the register. Her grandmother stood in front of the shop holding an armful of wildflowers, smiling with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime creating beauty. "I hope so," Emma whispered. That evening, she locked the shop long after sunset. Instead of going home, she rolled out dozens of sketches across the work table. Every arrangement would tell part of one story. The entrance would represent hope. The ballroom would celebrate generosity. The dining tables would remind guests that beauty was strongest when shared. She never designed flowers simply to look expensive. She designed them to make people feel something. 3 nights passed almost without sleep. Emma's hands became covered with tiny scratches from rose thorns. Her shoulders ached. Coffee grew cold beside unfinished bouquets. Classical music played quietly through the old radio, while dawn slowly painted the shop windows gold. Lily watched her work with admiration. "You know," she said softly, "nobody will notice half these details." Emma smiled without looking up. "I'll know." "And that's enough?" Emma carefully adjusted a single white rose by less than an inch. "It has to be." By the morning of the gala, delivery trucks lined the narrow street outside the flower shop. Volunteers loaded towering floral arches into padded containers. Crystal vases filled the cargo area. Emma checked every arrangement herself, not because she distrusted anyone, because flowers deserved gentle hands. City Hall looked magnificent. The crystal ballroom occupied the top floor, surrounded by enormous windows overlooking the river. Golden chandeliers sparkled overhead. White marble columns framed the entrance. Workers hurried through the corridors preparing for the evening. Emma immediately directed her small team with calm confidence. The orchids stay away from direct sunlight. She pointed toward the ballroom. Move the peonies 5 feet closer to the windows. A waiter nearly collided with a floral stand. Emma caught it before it tipped. No damage. She smiled reassuringly. We're still ahead of schedule. Hours passed in steady rhythm. Flower by flower. Ribbon by ribbon. Everything slowly transformed. By late afternoon, the ballroom looked less like a government building and more like a living garden. Even hotel staff stopped occasionally just to admire it. One elderly janitor shook his head. I've worked here 18 years. He smiled warmly. I've never seen this room look so alive. Emma's cheeks turned slightly pink. Thank you. At 6 o'clock, the first television crews arrived. Red carpets stretched across the entrance. Luxury cars rolled toward the front steps. Reporters adjusted microphones beneath bright studio lights. Emma quietly stepped aside. The decorations were ready. Now they belonged to the evening. She preferred remaining invisible. Lily approached, carrying a garment bag. You should change. Emma looked down at her work apron, covered with tiny leaves. Oh, she laughed. I forgot. Inside the garment bag hung a simple navy blue dress. Elegant, professional, nothing extravagant. Emma changed quickly before joining the staff near the ballroom entrance. Guests began arriving. Some admired the flowers. Others photographed them. Several complimented the arrangements without asking who created them. Emma didn't mind. The flowers weren't about her. They never had been. Then the atmosphere shifted. Security officers straightened. Television crews rushed toward the entrance. Someone whispered, "The mayor's here." Mayor Victor Harrington stepped from a black sedan wearing an immaculate tuxedo. Confident smile. Perfectly rehearsed handshake. Everything about him seemed designed for cameras. Behind him walked donors, advisors, and journalists, eager to capture every moment. Victor paused dramatically beneath Emma's floral arch. Camera flashes erupted. One reporter smiled. "Beautiful decorations, Mayor." Victor nodded proudly. "We wanted tonight to represent refinement." His gaze slowly drifted across the flowers. Then, toward Emma. She stood only a few feet away, holding a clipboard. Victor frowned almost imperceptibly. His campaign director leaned closer. "That's the florist." Victor's smile stiffened. His eyes traveled over Emma's curvy figure. The simple dress. The loose strands of hair escaping her bun after hours of work. Something about her clearly displeased him. He walked directly toward her. Television cameras followed. Emma smiled politely. "Good evening, Mayor. You're responsible for the flowers?" "Yes, sir." He looked her up and down once more, then glanced toward the cameras. An amused smile touched his lips. "Interesting choice." Emma blinked. "I'm sorry?" Victor spoke louder. Loud enough for nearby reporters. "I suppose talent comes in unexpected packages." Several guests chuckled. Emma forced a small smile. "I hope the flowers meet your expectations." Victor ignored the answer. Instead, he turned toward the nearest camera. "For events representing our city." He paused dramatically. "Presentation matters." His eyes returned to Emma. "And sometimes." Another pause. "First impressions can distract from elegance." The meaning landed immediately. A few uncomfortable guests looked away. Others laughed openly. Emma felt heat rise to her face. Lily stepped forward. "Sir, Emma has worked incredibly hard." Victor raised one hand. "I wasn't speaking to you." Emma gently touched Lily's arm, silently asking her not to argue. She had learned years ago that some people enjoyed public confrontations. She refused to give them one. "I'll leave," Emma said quietly. Victor nodded. "I think that's best." Then, with cameras still rolling, he addressed the head of security. "Please escort her somewhere less visible." The words struck harder than shouting ever could. Security hesitated. The older guard looked embarrassed. "Sir, the florist," Victor repeated. "Remove her." Emma lowered her eyes. "It's all right," she whispered to the guard. "I'll go." As she turned, the heel of a polished dress shoe clipped the base of one enormous floral pedestal. Not accidentally. Not quite. Just enough. Emma saw it. So did someone else. The arrangement tilted. For one impossible second, everything balanced. Then gravity won. Thousands of white orchids and roses crashed onto the marble floor. Crystals shattered. Water spread across the entrance. Guests gasped. Then came laughter. Reporters immediately lifted their cameras. Victor sighed dramatically. "What a shame." He looked toward Emma. "I suppose accidents happen." Emma stared at the ruined arrangement. She knew exactly what had happened. So did the quiet man standing 20 feet away. His dark eyes never left the mayor's polished shoe. Not once. Without defending herself, without arguing, Emma slowly knelt onto the marble floor. One by one, she gathered bruised flowers into her arms. Some petals had already fallen away. Others could still be saved. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not because of the flowers, because every laugh echoed louder than the last. A little girl standing beside her mother suddenly slipped away from the crowd. She picked up a single white orchid and handed it to Emma. "I think it's still pretty." Emma looked up. A soft smile appeared despite everything. "I think so too." The little girl's mother gently led her away. No one else moved, except one man. He bent down, quietly picked up another fallen flower, then another. Without introducing himself, without saying a single word, he knelt beside Emma and began helping her rescue every flower that could still bloom. The reporters stopped talking. The laughter slowly faded. No one recognized him. Not yet. When the last flower had been gathered, Emma whispered, "Thank you." The man simply nodded. She turned away to carry the flowers toward the service corridor. In the rush, a small leather-bound notebook slipped from her floral bag and landed beneath one of the ballroom chairs. She never noticed. The quiet man did. After Emma disappeared through the corridor doors, he walked over, picked it up, and brushed a few flower petals from its cover. He opened the first page. Inside was a hand-drawn sketch of an impossible garden, accompanied by a single handwritten sentence. "Flowers remember kindness long after people forget names." For the first time that evening, the quiet man smiled, and somewhere across the ballroom, a senior security officer suddenly recognized him. His face turned pale. He whispered into his radio, "Mr. Romano is here." Damian Romano closed the notebook carefully, as though the pages inside were more fragile than the flowers scattered across the ballroom. The laughter had already returned behind him, not because the guests were still mocking Emma, because another photographer had arrived. Another politician had begun shaking hands. Another speech was about to begin. The evening had simply decided to continue, as if nothing had happened. Damian slipped the notebook beneath his suit jacket. His expression never changed. He looked once toward Mayor Victor Harrington, who was now smiling broadly beneath the crystal chandeliers, while accepting compliments for a gala he had almost ruined. Then Damian quietly turned and walked toward the service corridor. He didn't ask anyone where Emma had gone. He simply followed the trail of crushed white petals leading away from the ballroom. The farther he walked from the cameras, the quieter the building became. The polished marble floors gave way to plain concrete. Elegant music faded behind thick walls. Staff hurried through narrow hallways carrying trays and folded tablecloths, barely noticing him. Near the loading dock, he finally saw her. Emma sat alone on an overturned wooden crate. The damaged flowers lay spread across another crate beside her. She wasn't crying anymore. She was carefully trimming broken stems, saving what she could, discarding only what had no chance of surviving. Damian remained in the doorway for a moment, watching. She worked with astonishing patience. A white rose missing several outer petals was placed into one bucket, a bruised peony into another. Only completely crushed flowers went into the waste bin. She treated every bloom as though it deserved one last opportunity. Finally, he stepped forward. Emma looked up, surprised. "Oh." She recognized him immediately. "The gentleman from the ballroom." He nodded once. "You forgot this." He handed her the notebook. Emma's eyes widened. "My notebook?" She held it against her chest with visible relief. "I thought I'd lost it." "You almost did." A faint smile crossed her face. "Thank you." Neither spoke for several seconds. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, only unfamiliar. Emma finally looked toward the damaged flowers. "I'm sorry you had to witness all that." Damien said nothing. She gave a small, tired laugh. "I suppose this wasn't exactly the impression I hoped to make." Still, silence. Not cold, just patient. She sighed softly. "I've learned people usually remember the embarrassing moments." She picked up another broken rose. They rarely remember the work that came before them. Damien watched her straighten the bent stem. Then, without asking permission, he rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, knelt beside her, and reached for the next flower. Emma blinked. "You don't have to do that." "I know." His voice was calm. "But I'm already here." She smiled despite herself. "You'll ruin your suit. It can be cleaned." He carefully removed damaged leaves from a white orchid with surprising precision. Emma couldn't help watching. "You've done this before?" "No. You look like you have." "I pay attention." For the first time since the humiliation inside the ballroom, Emma laughed. A quiet laugh. Small. Real. "You make flower arranging sound like accounting." Damien looked at the orchid. "Flowers are less complicated." She raised an eyebrow. "You'd be surprised." Together, they worked without rushing. Emma showed him where to cut each stem, how to remove crushed petals without damaging the bloom, how flowers placed in cold water quickly sometimes survived far longer than expected. Damien followed every instruction carefully, never pretending he knew more than he did, never trying to impress her. After several minutes, Emma noticed something. "You haven't asked my name." He looked at her. "No. Most people ask." "I assumed you'd tell me if you wanted to." She considered that answer. "I suppose that's fair." She extended one hand. "I'm Emma." He looked at it briefly before shaking it. "Damien." "Nice to meet you." "And you." Neither offered a last name. Neither asked. A loud crash echoed from outside the loading dock. One of the catering assistants had accidentally knocked over a trash container. Several plastic bags split open. Among the discarded boxes, Emma noticed something that made her immediately stand. Her floral arrangements. Entire centerpieces. Thrown away. Oh no. Without hesitation, she hurried toward the dumpster. The arrangements weren't destroyed, just discarded, because they had been replaced after the entrance accident. She carefully lifted one arrangement free, then another. Several flowers remained perfectly healthy. Damien watched silently for a moment, then walked over and lifted the heaviest arrangement himself. Emma looked surprised. "You really don't have to." "I know. You keep saying that. So do you." For a second, they both smiled. An elderly janitor pushing a cleaning cart stopped nearby. He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "They told us to throw everything out." Emma shook her head gently. "It's all right." "No," the man sighed. "It isn't." He looked around to make sure no supervisors were nearby. "I saw what happened." A pause. "It wasn't your fault." Emma offered him a kind smile. "Thank you." The janitor hesitated before reaching into his pocket. "My wife," he said softly, "loves flowers." He looked almost ashamed. "Would it be all right if I took one home?" Emma's face brightened instantly. "Please." She selected the freshest white rose from the rescued arrangements, then added lavender, baby's breath, a sprig of eucalyptus. She wrapped everything in simple brown paper, handed it to him. No charge. The janitor's eyes became glassy. "I can't accept that." You already have. She smiled. You reminded me not everyone believed what happened upstairs. The old man nodded gratefully before leaving. Damien watched him disappear through the parking lot carrying the bouquet, as though it were priceless. You gave him the best one. Emma shrugged. He'll appreciate it. And if someone else wanted to buy it, I'd make another. She answered simply. Damien looked away for a moment. There was no performance in her kindness. No expectation of being admired. She simply couldn't help herself. Back inside the ballroom, Mayor Harrington stood beneath the largest floral arch, speaking confidently with local reporters. The event has exceeded expectations. One journalist gestured toward the decorations. The flowers are extraordinary. Victor smiled broadly. We insisted on elegance. Another reporter asked, who designed them? For the briefest moment, Victor hesitated, then answered casually, our event design committee. No mention of Emma. No acknowledgement. Nothing. Across the room, Damien quietly entered through a side door. His jacket remained spotless. In one hand, he carried the rescued white rose Emma had trimmed only minutes earlier. He slipped it into an empty vase near the stage. The single flower somehow drew more attention than several expensive arrangements surrounding it. A television producer noticed. Beautiful, she whispered. Who added that? Nobody knew. Damien took his seat near the back of the ballroom, far from the cameras, far from the politicians. He preferred it that way. His longtime advisor, Marco, approached quietly. I've been looking everywhere for you. Damien didn't answer. Marco followed his gaze toward the mayor. Interesting evening. Still silence. Marco lowered his voice. I assume you've seen enough. Damien nodded once. Marco understood exactly what that meant. When Damien became that quiet, someone had already made a serious mistake. The mayor eventually noticed Damien seated in the audience. His entire expression changed. He hurried over immediately, extending both hands. Mr. Romano. Guests nearby turned toward the unexpected greeting. Victor smiled broadly. What an honor. Damien stood politely. The mayor continued speaking. I had no idea you'd be attending tonight. A pause. I hope you're enjoying the evening. Damien looked calmly into his eyes, then answered with only 4 words. I've seen enough. Victor laughed awkwardly. I'm delighted to hear that. He completely misunderstood. Damien gave the slightest nod. No smile. No explanation. Then he quietly walked away. Victor watched him disappear into the crowd, feeling oddly unsettled without understanding why. Outside, Emma loaded the rescued flowers into her aging delivery van. Nearly half the arrangements had survived. She couldn't bear the thought of throwing them away. Even if no one paid for them, she would find someone who needed them. Hospitals, nursing homes, churches, anywhere. Flowers deserved to be seen before they faded. She closed the van doors and started the engine. As she drove away from City Hall, she never noticed the black sedan leaving a few car lengths behind, not following her aggressively, simply keeping her in sight. Back inside the ballroom, Marco returned to Damien carrying a folder. Our team confirmed the florist's name. Damien looked down. The folder read, Emma Brooks, owner. Brooks Flower House, operating for 28 years, currently facing financial difficulties. Marco hesitated. Would you like me to contact her? Damien closed the folder. Not yet. What would you like to do? Damien looked through the ballroom windows toward the city lights beyond, then quietly answered, find out who she is, when nobody is watching. The morning after the gala, Emma unlocked the front door of Brooks Flower House before sunrise. The little brass bell above the entrance rang softly, just as it had every morning for nearly 3 decades. Normally, the familiar sound brought her comfort. Today, it only reminded her that another difficult day had begun. She switched on the lights. Golden warmth slowly filled the tiny shop. Fresh lilies greeted her with their delicate fragrance. Buckets of roses waited to be trimmed. The old radio crackled to life with gentle piano music. Everything looked exactly the same. Yet somehow, nothing felt the same anymore. Emma placed the rescued flowers from the gala across the work table. Many had survived. A few had even begun opening more fully overnight. She smiled faintly. "You really didn't want to give up, did you?" Her fingers brushed the petals with the same tenderness someone else might reserve for family photographs. Lily entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I brought the strongest one I could find." Emma laughed softly. "I'll probably need both." Lily set the cups down before pulling out her phone. The smile on her face disappeared almost instantly. "Oh no." Emma looked up. "What happened?" Lily turned the screen around. A local entertainment page had posted a 30-second clip from the gala. It showed only one moment: Emma kneeling on the marble floor while guests laughed. The caption read, "Elegant charity gala, interrupted by clumsy florist." Thousands of comments had already appeared. "Maybe hire someone more professional. She ruined the whole entrance. She doesn't exactly fit a luxury event. How embarrassing." Emma quietly slid the phone back across the table. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She simply returned to trimming flower stems. Lily stared at her. "Aren't you angry?" Emma thought for a moment. "I am." Another pause. But flowers still need water. Business that morning felt unusually slow. People walked past the windows without entering. A longtime customer canceled an anniversary order through email. Another politely postponed an event. Neither explained why. Neither had to. Emma understood. Reputation could disappear much faster than it was built. Near noon, the shop door opened. An elderly woman stepped inside wearing a faded blue coat despite the warm weather. She walked slowly with the help of a wooden cane. Emma immediately smiled. "Good afternoon." The woman looked around nervously. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Never." Emma walked around the counter. "How can I help?" The woman hesitated before pointing toward a small arrangement of white daisies. "My husband," she paused, "would have turned 80 today." Emma's expression softened. "I'm sorry." "He loved daisies." The woman smiled sadly. "He always said they looked like tiny pieces of sunshine." Emma gently lifted the bouquet from the display. "They're beautiful flowers." "They are." The elderly woman reached into her purse. Several coins. A folded dollar bill. Nothing more. She counted them twice, then quietly looked away. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "I'm a little short." Emma didn't even glance at the money. Instead, she carried the bouquet back to the work table. She added fresh baby's breath, a few sprigs of lavender, soft greenery, then wrapped everything carefully in ivory paper. The arrangement became twice as beautiful. The woman watched in confusion. "I can't afford all that." Emma smiled. "I know." She tied the ribbon. Handed over the bouquet. "It's already paid for." The woman blinked. "What?" "My grandmother used to say flowers should never miss important birthdays." Emma winked gently. "So today, they're from both of us." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Emma answered. "You reminded me why I opened the shop this morning." The elderly woman reached out and squeezed Emma's hands. "They laughed at you yesterday." Emma froze. "I saw the video." A pause. "They were wrong." Another pause. "People who grow beautiful things usually carry invisible scars." Emma swallowed hard. The words settled somewhere deep inside her heart. Across the city, Damian Romano stepped out of a black sedan in front of a quiet residential neighborhood. Marco looked puzzled. "We're here?" Damian nodded. "The address?" Marco checked his tablet. "Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore." "The widow?" "Yes." Marco frowned. "I thought today's meetings." "Can wait." Damian walked toward the small white house. Mrs. Whitmore opened the front door before he knocked. Her face brightened immediately. "Damien!" She hugged him tightly. He returned the embrace without hesitation. For a man known throughout the city as distant and intimidating, his expression completely changed around her. She had cared for him after his mother passed away. To him, she was family. "You've gotten thinner," she scolded gently. "I've been busy. You always say that. And you're always right," she laughed. "Come inside." The cozy living room smelled faintly of cinnamon. Old family photographs lined the fireplace. Fresh flowers rested in the center of the dining table. White daisies, lavender, soft greenery. Damien stopped walking. He recognized the arrangement immediately. Not because of the flowers, because of the ribbon. Emma tied bows in a distinctive way. Simple, elegant, slightly asymmetrical. "You like them?" Mrs. Whitmore asked proudly. "They're beautiful. The florist gave them to me." Damien looked at her. "She wouldn't let me pay." A smile appeared almost invisibly. "What was her name?" "I believe." The elderly woman thought carefully. "Emma." Damien looked back toward the bouquet. His eyes noticed a small handwritten card tucked beneath the ribbon. Mrs. Whitmore handed it to him. "I've read it 6 times already." He unfolded the tiny card. The handwriting matched the notebook perfectly. It read, "Flowers aren't measured by their price." He turned the card over. Another sentence appeared. "They're measured by the comfort they leave behind." Damien read it twice, then folded it carefully. Without realizing it, he smiled. Mrs. Whitmore noticed immediately. "You're smiling." He looked almost surprised. "Am I?" "You are." She laughed warmly. "I haven't seen that smile since your mother was alive." Back at City Hall, Mayor Harrington held a press conference celebrating the success of the charity gala. Television crews filled the room. The event raised record donations. Applause followed. A reporter lifted her hand. "Mayor, the floral decorations received tremendous praise." Victor smiled confidently. "They certainly did." "Who designed them?" Again, the smallest hesitation. "Our event design committee." Another lie. From the back of the room, another journalist frowned. "I've spoken with several guests. They mentioned an independent florist." Victor's smile never disappeared. Many vendors contributed. He smoothly changed the subject. "No single individual deserves all the credit." The cameras continued rolling. Marco watched the press conference from Damien's office television. He muted the sound. He lies effortlessly. Damien remained standing by the window overlooking the city. The difficult ones usually do. Marco crossed his arms. "We could expose him today. We could expose him today. We could. But we won't?" Damien slowly shook his head. "No." "Why?" He looked toward the bouquet now resting inside his office. "Because truth," he answered quietly, "has better timing than anger." That evening, Emma closed the flower shop later than usual. Business had been disappointing. Only 5 paying customers. She began placing unsold flowers into smaller arrangements. Tomorrow morning, she would deliver them to the children's hospital. Not because anyone requested them, because empty hospital rooms felt less lonely with flowers. As she locked the front door, she noticed a black luxury sedan parked quietly across the street. The engine wasn't running. The headlights were off. For a moment, she wondered if someone was lost. Before she could think further, the car slowly drove away. Inside, Damien glanced once toward the flower shop in the rearview mirror. Marco looked over. "You never went inside." "No. You've been here 40 minutes. "I know." Marco smiled knowingly. "You were watching." Damien answered without embarrassment. "I wanted to see..." A pause. Whether she was kind because someone was looking. Another pause. Or because that's who she is. Marco already knew the answer. "So?" Damien looked out into the quiet evening. She's exactly the same, even when nobody is watching. At that very moment, Emma switched off the final light inside the flower shop. She never noticed the elegant black envelope someone quietly slid beneath her front door after she left. It bore no return address, only a single handwritten sentence. I would like to order flowers for someone who has forgotten how to smile. Emma found the black envelope the following morning, before she had even unlocked the front door. It rested on the worn wooden floor just inside the entrance, untouched except for the thin beam of sunlight stretching across it from the front window. She frowned. There was no stamp, no address, no company logo, only thick cream-colored paper and elegant handwriting. She bent down and picked it up carefully. Inside lay a single card. No business letter, no contract, no explanation, just one sentence. I would like to order flowers for someone who has forgotten how to smile. Emma read it twice, then a third time. Lily arrived a few minutes later carrying a box of fresh tulips. She noticed the thoughtful look on Emma's face. What is it? Emma handed her the card. Lily tilted her head. That's unusual. I know. No name? Emma shook her head. No phone number? Nothing. Lily laughed softly. You've officially attracted mysterious customers. Emma smiled. Or someone with an unusual sense of humor. She placed the card beside the cash register. Either way, if they come, I'll ask. The morning remained quiet. A young father bought sunflowers for his daughter's school recital. A nurse stopped in to purchase carnations for a recovering patient. Emma spent nearly an hour helping a teenage boy choose flowers for his nervous first date. She never rushed anyone. Every customer left smiling, even those who only bought a single stem. Just after noon, the bell above the door chimed again. Emma looked up automatically. The man standing in the doorway wore a charcoal overcoat over a perfectly tailored dark suit. Tall, calm, composed. She recognized him immediately. The gentleman from City Hall. He gave a small nod. So we meet again. Emma smiled warmly. I'm glad you found your notebook owner. He looked at her. I'm glad I found the notebook. Lily quietly excused herself to organize flowers in the back room. Not because she had work to do, because she sensed this conversation belonged to them. Emma stepped around the counter. Welcome. She glanced toward the display tables. What can I help you with today? Damien reached into his coat pocket and removed the same cream-colored card. He placed it gently on the counter. I believe this belongs to my order. Emma looked at it, then back at him. So? She laughed softly. You're my mysterious customer. It appears so. She picked up the card again. I've been trying to imagine who wrote this. Were your guesses close? Not even a little. A brief silence settled between them. Emma folded the card carefully. So, she asked gently, tell me about the person. Damien looked toward the buckets of flowers lining the shop. She's 76. Emma listened. She raised children who weren't hers. A pause. She never expected gratitude. Another pause. Recently, she's forgotten how to laugh. Emma didn't interrupt. She simply waited. Damien appreciated that. She smiles out of politeness. He continued quietly. But not because she's happy. Emma nodded slowly. I understand. No, he answered after a moment. I don't think anyone really does. Emma walked slowly through the shop. Her fingertips brushed lightly across different blooms as she thought. She didn't ask how much he wanted to spend. She didn't reach automatically for the most expensive flowers. Instead, she searched for meaning. She stopped in front of a bucket of pale peach garden roses. These, she whispered. Damien watched quietly. She added white lisianthus, soft blue delphiniums, sprigs of rosemary, and finally, a handful of tiny white daisies. You chose daisies, he observed. Emma smiled. They remind people that happiness doesn't always arrive dramatically. She picked up one between her fingers. Sometimes, it quietly grows where nobody thinks to look. Damien said nothing, but he remembered the bouquet Eleanor had received. It had also contained daisies, not because they were fashionable, because Emma believed they carried hope. For nearly 40 minutes, she worked without rushing. The bouquet slowly became something extraordinary. Not extravagant, not oversized, balanced, warm, alive. Finally, she wrapped it in textured ivory paper and tied it with deep green silk ribbon. She stepped back. There. Damien studied it. What does it say? Emma blinked. I'm sorry? The flowers. He nodded toward the bouquet. What are they saying? She looked at the arrangement for several seconds before answering. They're saying, you don't have to smile today. Another pause. We'll wait until you're ready. For the first time since entering the shop, Damien's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, but enough that Emma noticed. She smiled. I hope that's what she needs. So do I, he answered. Emma carefully placed the bouquet on the counter. That comes to $120. Damien reached for his wallet. Without counting, he placed several crisp bills on the counter. Emma glanced down, then frowned. This is far too much. It isn't. She quickly separated the money. No. She pushed most of it back toward him. I can't accept this. You earned it. I earned 120. She smiled apologetically. Not 1,200. Damien looked at her calmly. The flowers are worth more. Emma shook her head. Maybe. She pushed the extra money closer. But my prices shouldn't change depending on who walks through the door. He studied her for a long moment. Very few people ever returned money to him. Almost no one argued against being overpaid. You'll offend me, he said quietly. Emma laughed. I hope not. But you'll offend me if I keep it. The corner of Damien's mouth lifted slightly, an almost invisible smile. You're difficult. So I've been told. Frequently. She grinned. Usually by people trying to give me too much money. For a heartbeat, neither looked away. Lily peeked through the storeroom doorway and smiled to herself before disappearing again. Finally, Damien accepted the returned cash. But before Emma wrapped the bouquet for him, he quietly slipped a small sealed envelope beneath the ribbon. She noticed. Is that a card? It is. For her? Yes. Emma nodded. I won't peek. I know. He picked up the bouquet with surprising care, almost exactly the way Emma carried flowers herself. You've learned. She teased. You were a good teacher. I've only taught you once. It was enough. Before leaving, Damien paused near the door. May I ask you something? Of course. You gave flowers away yesterday. Emma looked slightly puzzled. The elderly lady? He nodded. You never asked if she could repay you later. Emma leaned lightly against the counter. My grandmother used to tell me. She smiled at the memory. Flowers shouldn't become another reason for people to feel poor. A pause. If someone needs comfort, they've already paid enough. Damien absorbed every word, then quietly nodded. Thank you. She tilted her head. For what? For answering honestly. He opened the door. The little brass bell rang again. Then he was gone. Emma watched through the window as he crossed the street. Instead of climbing into the sleek black sedan waiting nearby, he walked several blocks on foot carrying the bouquet. Almost as though he didn't want to rush the journey. Lily returned from the back room. So, Emma smiled to herself. So? I think your mysterious customer isn't mysterious anymore. Emma laughed. I still don't know very much about him. Lily folded her arms. You know enough. What do I know? That he listens. Emma thought about that. It was true. He rarely spoke. But when she answered, he never interrupted. Across town, Damien arrived at Eleanor Whitmore's house. She opened the door before he knocked. You brought flowers again? I did. She accepted the bouquet with delighted surprise. Oh, she whispered. They're beautiful. She noticed the sealed envelope tucked beneath the ribbon. Is this for me? He nodded. She opened it carefully. Inside was a simple handwritten note. Not from Damien, but from Emma. She had slipped it beneath the ribbon while wrapping the bouquet. It read, "Some seasons bloom later than others. Please don't mistake waiting for the end." Eleanor smiled through tears, then looked at Damien. You found her. He didn't ask how she knew. She simply did. That evening, Emma finished closing the flower shop. As she counted the day's receipts, Lily suddenly frowned. Emma, what is it? You said he only paid $120. He did. Lily pointed toward the business account notification on the computer. A wire transfer had arrived only minutes earlier. Amount received, $10,000. Reference, for the flowers. No sender name, no message. Emma stared at the screen in disbelief, then looked toward the dark street outside. The mysterious customer had just become even more mysterious. Emma stared at the computer screen for nearly a full minute. The number refused to make sense. $10,000. Not 1,000. Not 500. $10,000. She refreshed the banking page. The amount remained. Lily refreshed it again. Still there. Neither woman spoke. The flower shop felt unusually quiet, as though even the old refrigerator humming in the corner had paused to look at the screen. There has to be a mistake, Emma finally whispered. Lily nodded immediately. There has to be. Emma clicked on the transfer details. No company name. No personal account. Only one line appeared beneath the payment reference. For the flowers. Nothing more. Emma closed the laptop. I'm calling the bank tomorrow. Lily looked surprised. You're giving it back? If it isn't mine, Emma smiled faintly. It shouldn't stay with me. The following morning, the city wasn't talking about charity anymore. It wasn't talking about flowers. It was talking about humiliation. Every local news station replayed the same edited clip from the gala. The mayor, standing confidently beneath crystal chandeliers. Emma, kneeling on the marble floor. Guests laughing. The footage ended before anyone could see why the arrangement had fallen. It ended before the quiet man stepped forward to help. It ended before the truth had a chance to breathe. News anchors debated professionalism. Radio hosts joked about disastrous event planners. Social media continued filling with cruel comments from people who had never met Emma. None of them knew her name. Most didn't care. To them, she was simply the woman in the video. Business at Brooks Flower House slowed even further. The morning wedding consultation canceled. An anniversary dinner canceled. A hotel postponed renewing its monthly floral contract. Emma answered every phone call with the same calm voice. I understand. No problem. Thank you for letting me know. After hanging up, she simply updated her calendar. More empty spaces appeared with every passing hour. Lily watched helplessly. This isn't fair. Emma continued arranging white tulips. Fairness doesn't usually pay rent. You shouldn't joke. I'm not. She smiled sadly. I'm trying not to panic. Across town, Mayor Victor Harrington entered City Hall, surrounded by campaign advisors. The atmosphere inside his office couldn't have been more different. Champagne glasses clinked. Campaign posters lined the walls. Everyone congratulated him on the successful gala. One advisor grinned. Donations exceeded projections. Another added, the media coverage has been excellent. Victor loosened his tie proudly. I told you the event would strengthen public confidence. A young communications assistant hesitated before speaking. There is one concern. Victor looked up. What concern? The florist. Victor frowned. What about her? The online discussion is becoming... She searched for the right word. Divisive. Victor waved dismissively. It'll disappear in 2 days. His chief political strategist wasn't so certain. The problem isn't the florist. Victor looked confused. It's perception. He placed several printed articles across the conference table. The public increasingly dislikes people who appear arrogant. Victor scoffed. I wasn't arrogant. You embarrass someone publicly. It was necessary. For whom? Silence. Victor walked toward the windows overlooking the city. I'm running this city, he said confidently. I can't allow disorder during televised events. His strategist quietly folded his hands. The flowers were magnificent. Victor smiled. They were. And everyone believes your office arranged them. Victor turned. As they should. Another lie. Spoken so naturally it barely sounded like one. Meanwhile, Damian Romano sat alone inside the top-floor conference room of Romano Holdings. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the skyline. Executives filled the polished oak table. Financial reports waited neatly stacked. No one had begun the meeting, because Damian hadn't spoken yet. Marco entered carrying a slim black folder. He placed it in front of Damian. The investigation. Damian opened it. Inside lay copies of every security camera angle recorded during the gala. Hallway cameras, kitchen cameras, entrance cameras, ballroom cameras, loading dock cameras. 43 different recordings. One photograph had been printed larger than the rest. It showed Mayor Harrington's polished shoe making deliberate contact with the base of Emma's floral pedestal. Not enough to look obvious, enough to make it fall. Marco watched Damian carefully. Our legal team reviewed every angle. He paused. It wasn't an accident. I know. You saw it. I did. The executives exchanged nervous glances. One finally spoke. Sir, if we're pursuing legal action against the mayor. Damian closed the folder gently. We aren't. Confused silence filled the room. Marco frowned. We have undeniable evidence. We do. We could destroy his political career. Damian looked calmly around the table. I have no interest in destroying anyone. Another pause. I have an interest in truth. Marco leaned forward. So what do we do? Damian rested one hand on the folder. Collect everything. Every recording. Every witness. Every document. Another pause. Leave nothing incomplete. Marco slowly nodded. He understood. Damian wasn't preparing revenge. He was preparing certainty. Late that afternoon, Emma arrived at the downtown bank carrying a folder containing the transfer confirmation. The young bank manager welcomed her politely. What can I do for you today? I received money that doesn't belong to me. The manager smiled. That happens less often than you'd think. Emma handed over the paperwork. I'd like to return it. He reviewed the transaction carefully. Several minutes passed. Then he looked genuinely puzzled. I'm sorry. What is it? The transfer was authorized through a private financial trust. So. He looked apologetic. The sender specifically instructed that the funds cannot be reversed. Emma blinked. What? The payment is legally final. There must be someone I can contact. I'm afraid the sender requested complete anonymity. Emma sighed. So I'm just supposed to keep $10,000? The manager smiled sympathetically. It appears so. She left the bank feeling more confused than relieved. Money had never solved her problems. This certainly didn't feel like it would. That evening, Damian stood alone inside a quiet security office beneath City Hall. Rows of surveillance monitors covered one entire wall. The head of security greeted him respectfully. Mr. Romano, the recordings? They're ready. He handed Damian a secure hard drive. Every camera. Damian accepted it. Has anyone else requested copies? The security chief hesitated. No. Then lowered his voice. Although, the mayor's office asked us to permanently delete several angles. Damian looked at him. Did you? The older man shook his head immediately. No. A pause. I've worked security for 31 years. I've learned that cameras shouldn't have opinions. Another pause. They should simply remember. For the first time all day, Damien smiled. Barely, but genuinely. Back at Brooks' flower house, Emma locked the front door and switched off the display lights. Only the workshop lamps remained glowing softly over the work table. She picked up her grandmother's old gardening gloves. The leather had become cracked with age. Inside one glove, folded many years ago, rested a tiny handwritten note. Her grandmother's handwriting. Kindness always blooms later than cruelty. Be patient. Emma closed her eyes. I hope you're right, she whispered. Across the city, Mayor Harrington stepped onto the balcony outside his office to wave at reporters leaving for the evening. He smiled confidently, believing the worst had already passed, believing the story belonged to him, believing cameras had only captured what he wanted the public to see. He had no idea that 43 untouched security recordings now rested inside a small black hard drive sitting on Damien Romano's desk, and among them, one forgotten camera mounted above the ballroom entrance had captured everything, including the exact moment the mayor deliberately nudged Emma's floral display with his polished shoe. The truth had been quietly waiting all along. It simply hadn't been watched yet. Damien Romano watched the security footage alone. Not once, not twice, 5 times. The conference room remained completely dark except for the glow of the enormous screen at the far end. No music played. No one interrupted. Only the quiet hum of the projector filled the room. Each replay revealed details the previous viewing had missed. A waiter instinctively reaching to save the arrangement. A little girl covering her mouth in shock. Emma apologizing to a security guard who had been ordered to escort her away. The old janitor lowering his eyes in embarrassment. None of those moments had appeared online. Only the laughter had survived the edits. Damien paused the video at exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds. The image froze. Mayor Victor Harrington's polished shoe rested firmly against the base of the floral pedestal. The contact lasted less than a second. Enough. Marco stood quietly behind him. Our analysts slowed the footage. He placed another folder on the table. The pressure is intentional. Damien nodded once. I know. The camera angle from the west entrance confirms it. Another photograph slid across the table. Then another. Every angle told the same story. Not an accident. A choice. Marco folded his arms. The legal team is ready. They can file by noon. Damien remained silent. They're confident. Still. Silence. Marco finally sighed. You aren't interested in a lawsuit. No. You aren't interested in compensation. No. Then what? Damien looked at the frozen frame one last time before switching off the projector. I want people to see. A pause. What actually happened? The next morning, Emma unlocked Brooks' flower house, as she always did, despite the cancellations. Despite the whispers. Despite the viral video. Flowers still arrived before sunrise. Life still needed tending. She placed buckets of fresh roses near the window while humming softly to herself. Not because she felt cheerful, because routine helped quiet anxious thoughts. Lily entered carrying pastries. I brought breakfast. Emma smiled. You also brought enough for 6 people. I'm stress eating. Emma laughed. That's fair. They shared coffee in comfortable silence before the bell above the door rang. A young couple stepped inside holding hands. Emma greeted them warmly. Good morning. The woman smiled nervously. We're getting married next spring. Emma brightened. Congratulations. The couple exchanged an awkward glance. The man finally spoke. We wanted to hire you. Emma reached automatically for her appointment book. I'd love to help. Another silence. Then, the young woman looked down. My mother saw the news. Emma understood before the sentence finished. I'm sorry. The bride looked miserable. I didn't want to cancel. Emma smiled gently. You don't have to apologize. But it's all right. Emma closed the appointment book. I hope your wedding is beautiful. The couple left looking more heartbroken than relieved. Lily waited until the door closed, then slammed a ribbon spool onto the work table. This is ridiculous. Emma quietly picked it up. It isn't their fault. It absolutely is. They're scared. They're cowards. Emma shook her head. They're trying to keep peace in their family. Lily stared at her. How do you always find the kindest explanation? Emma smiled sadly. Sometimes. It's the only explanation that lets me sleep. Across town. Inside Romano Holdings, a media consultant finished presenting 3 possible strategies. We can issue a public statement. She clicked the remote. Or hold a press conference. Another slide appeared. Or release selected evidence supporting Miss Brooks. Damien looked at none of the slides. What happens if we release only part of the evidence? The consultant hesitated. The public believes whichever side edits more effectively. Damien looked up. And if we release everything? A long silence followed. Finally, she answered. Then, people make up their own minds. He nodded. Good. By noon, every major news outlet in the city received the same email. No dramatic headline, no political statement, no accusations, only a simple subject line. Complete ballroom security footage. Attached beneath it, 43 synchronized camera angles, unedited, time-stamped, authenticated by City Hall's own security department. No narrator, no commentary, only truth. At first, very few journalists opened the files. The videos were too long, too ordinary. But one investigative reporter decided to watch, then another. Within an hour, phones began ringing across every newsroom in the city. You need to see this. No. Watch the entrance camera. The mayor. Oh my God. By late afternoon, the story exploded. Not because someone accused Mayor Harrington, because the cameras quietly contradicted him. Every angle matched. Every timestamp aligned. Every frame confirmed the same sequence. Emma greeting him politely. His mocking remarks. His deliberate step toward the floral display. The slight push. The falling arrangement. His performance of surprise. Emma apologizing for something she hadn't done. Then, the quiet stranger kneeling beside her. Television stations replayed a different clip now. Not laughter. Not humiliation. Kindness. The image of Damien kneeling on the marble floor beside Emma spread across every major broadcast. People who had mocked her 24 hours earlier began asking uncomfortable questions. Who was she? Why had she stayed calm? Why had no one shown this before? Brooks' flower house remained unusually quiet. Emma hadn't watched the news. She had deliberately avoided it. Instead, she spent the afternoon preparing bouquets for the children's hospital. The bell above the door rang once more. She looked up. The man from the gala stood there again. This time, without his overcoat, without ceremony, simply holding the door open behind him. Emma smiled. You're back. I am. I hope the flowers helped. They did. She noticed something different about him. He looked lighter. What brings you here today? Damien walked slowly toward the counter. I wanted to introduce myself properly. Emma tilted her head. I thought you already did. No. He extended his hand. My name is Damien Romano. The smile faded gently from Emma's face. Not because she felt afraid. Because she recognized the name. Everyone in the city did. Businessman. Investor. Philanthropist. A man surrounded by endless rumors. She looked at him, then quietly shook his hand. Emma Brooks. I know. She laughed softly. I suppose you do. For a moment, neither mentioned the news. Neither mentioned the gala. Finally, Emma spoke. I saw your face on television once. You probably heard unpleasant things. I heard many things. She smiled kindly. I've learned rumors usually tell us more about the storyteller. Damien looked at her for several seconds. You surprise me. So I've been told. He reached into his jacket and placed a folded newspaper on the counter. Emma glanced down. The front page showed the ballroom footage. Her own photograph. The headline read, "Full security video changes everything." She looked back at Damien. You released it. He nodded once. I asked permission from no one. A pause. Accept the truth. Emma lowered her eyes to the newspaper again. I don't know what to say. You don't have to. No. She smiled faintly. I think I do. She looked directly into his eyes. Thank you. He shook his head. I didn't help you. Emma looked confused. You helped everyone else. She frowned. I don't understand. You already knew who you were. A pause. The people watching didn't. The words settled quietly between them. After a moment, Damien looked around the flower shop. I have another request. Emma smiled. I was hoping you would. He removed a cream-colored envelope from inside his jacket. Not black this time. Ivory. Elegant. He placed it carefully on the counter. My family is holding a private gathering. Emma opened it. Inside was an invitation. No luxury ballroom. No politicians. Only a handwritten note. The Romano family garden. Sunday afternoon. We would be honored if you designed the flowers. Emma looked up. You trust me with your family's event? I do. She hesitated. What if I disappoint you? Damien answered without the slightest pause. You won't. Emma looked back at the invitation. Something about it felt different. Not like a business contract. Not like a wealthy client hiring a florist. It felt personal. She smiled. I'd be honored. Damien nodded once. So would my family. He turned toward the door. Then stopped. Without looking back, he said quietly, my mother loved daisies. Another pause. So do I. The bell above the door rang softly as he disappeared into the afternoon sunlight. Emma stood perfectly still, holding the invitation in both hands. She had the strange feeling that she hadn't just accepted a new job. She had stepped into an entirely new chapter of her life. Sunday morning arrived wrapped in silver mist. Emma had been awake since before dawn. Not because she still had flowers to prepare. She had finished those hours ago. She simply couldn't quiet the nervous excitement growing inside her. The invitation from Damien Romano rested neatly beside her coffee cup. She had read it so many times that the fold along the center had begun to soften. The Romano family garden. No address beyond a quiet estate on the northern edge of the city. No mention of guests. No mention of status. Just a request for flowers. And somehow, that made her even more anxious. Lily leaned against the workshop door with folded arms. You've rearranged that bouquet 4 times. Emma looked down. Had she? She laughed softly. 5. I was trying to be kind. Emma sighed. I've never worked for a family like this. You've worked for mayors. Emma smiled. I don't think that counts anymore. Lily walked over and gently turned one white rose slightly to the left. There. Emma raised an eyebrow. You changed one flower. Exactly. Lily grinned. Now stop worrying. 2 delivery vans left Brooks' flower house just after 8. The first carried towering arrangements of white hydrangeas, climbing roses, lavender, and delicate jasmine vines. The second held smaller centerpieces for long wooden tables. Emma followed behind in her aging pickup truck. She preferred driving herself. It gave her time to think, or at least, to try. The city slowly disappeared behind her. Concrete gave way to rolling hills. Busy streets became quiet country roads lined with old oak trees. She expected towering gates, armed security, something cold and intimidating. Instead, The Romano estate surprised her. The entrance gate stood open. Wildflowers grew naturally along the stone walls. Children chased butterflies across a nearby meadow. An elderly gardener waved cheerfully as she drove past. Nothing about the place resembled the rumors people whispered about Damien Romano. Emma parked near an old greenhouse covered in climbing ivy. Before she could unload a single arrangement, several people were already walking toward her. Not bodyguards, volunteers. A gray-haired woman carrying watering cans smiled warmly. "You must be Emma." Emma blinked. "Yes, we've been looking forward to meeting you." Another volunteer reached for a floral crate. "Careful." Emma laughed. "Those roses bruise easily." The man smiled. "So do people." She looked at him. He winked playfully. "We've learned to carry both gently around here." Within minutes, half a dozen volunteers helped unload every flower. No one asked who was responsible for carrying heavy boxes. No one looked twice at Emma's appearance. They simply worked together, as though she had always belonged. She stepped into the garden and stopped. It was breathtaking. Stone pathways curved through thousands of blooming flowers. Old maple trees provided cool shade. A small pond reflected the morning sky like polished glass. Birds nested among climbing roses. Everything felt peaceful, alive, loved. Emma whispered almost to herself. "This place," an elderly gardener overheard. "Mrs. Romano designed most of it." He smiled. Damien refused to change anything after she passed. Emma looked around with fresh eyes. Suddenly, the garden no longer felt luxurious. It felt remembered. Every flower seemed planted for a reason. Every path carried history. As she began arranging centerpieces beneath a wooden pavilion, a familiar voice spoke behind her. "I had a feeling you'd start with the roses." Emma turned. Damien stood only a few feet away. No expensive suit, no tie. Simple dark trousers, white shirt with rolled sleeves. He looked different, almost relaxed. Emma smiled. "You caught me." "You noticed." "I notice flowers." She laughed. "I've realized that." For a few moments, they worked side by side without speaking. Damien carried heavy urns exactly where Emma pointed. He followed instructions without question. She watched him straighten one arrangement carefully before stepping back to compare both sides. "You've improved," she teased. "You created a demanding student." "I don't remember assigning homework." "You didn't." He adjusted one final stem. "I gave myself some." Emma couldn't help laughing. Their conversation was interrupted by a young woman running across the lawn. "Damien." She threw her arms around him. He hugged her tightly. "You made it." She stepped back. "You actually smiled." Damien raised one eyebrow. "Did I?" "I saw it." She turned toward Emma. "You must be Emma." Emma nodded politely. "I'm Isabella." She extended her hand warmly. "His younger sister." Emma smiled. "It's nice to meet you." "You too." Then Isabella's eyes suddenly narrowed. She tilted her head. "Wait?" She studied Emma more closely. "I know you." Emma looked confused. "I don't think we've met." "I have," Isabella whispered. It was raining. Emma frowned, searching her memory. Isabella slowly looked toward one of the small bouquets resting on the table. White lilies, blue delphiniums, tiny sprigs of rosemary. Her eyes filled with emotion. It was this bouquet. Emma looked at it, then back at Isabella. "I'm sorry. I don't remember." Isabella smiled through gathering tears. "You wouldn't." She gently touched the flowers. 3 years ago, my daughter," her voice faltered, "didn't survive childbirth." The garden suddenly became very quiet. Even the birds seemed to disappear. "I couldn't bear going to the cemetery empty-handed," Isabella continued softly. "I wandered into your flower shop." Emma listened without interrupting. "I barely spoke. I just stood there crying." Another pause. "You made this bouquet." She pointed toward the lilies. You asked my daughter's name. Emma felt something stir inside her memory. A young woman, rain-soaked coat, red eyes, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold her purse. Sophia, Emma breathed. Isabella nodded. You remembered. I remember her name, Emma whispered. I remember thinking, no mother should have to choose funeral flowers. Tears slipped quietly down Isabella's cheeks. You refused to let me pay. Emma smiled sadly. I remember that too. You told me. Isabella closed her eyes. That love doesn't disappear just because life becomes shorter. Emma lowered her gaze. I hoped it helped. Isabella laughed through tears. It saved me. Without another word, she stepped forward and embraced Emma. Not politely, not formally. Like someone hugging a person who had unknowingly carried part of her grief. Emma returned the embrace gently. Across the garden, several volunteers quietly looked away to give them privacy. Damien stood beneath an old maple tree watching them. Marco approached beside him. You knew. Damien nodded. Eleanor recognized the bouquet. So you checked. I did. Marco smiled faintly. She comforted your sister years before either of you knew her. Damien watched Emma carefully adjusting Isabella's bouquet once again. She never told anyone. No. She probably doesn't even remember how many people she's helped. Damien answered quietly. That's exactly why I wanted my family to meet her. Later that afternoon, long wooden tables filled with relatives, neighbors, volunteers, and old friends. No reporters. No photographers. No politicians. Children ran freely across the gardens. Music drifted softly through the trees. Emma noticed something unexpected. Everyone treated Damien with respect, but no one feared him. They teased him, laughed with him, asked him to carry chairs. An elderly woman even scolded him for forgetting to drink enough water. He accepted it all with quiet amusement. Nothing resembled the frightening stories people often whispered. As the gathering drew to a close, Emma wandered toward the greenhouse alone. Inside, hundreds of white daisies bloomed beneath warm afternoon light. A small bronze plaque rested near the entrance. She walked closer. It read, For Elena Romano, who believed every wounded heart deserved a garden. Emma smiled softly. So that's where you learned it. A voice behind her answered. No. She turned. Damien stood in the doorway. I learned it from watching her. A pause. And recently, his eyes met hers. I've been learning it again. Neither spoke for several seconds. The silence carried no awkwardness, only understanding. As Emma prepared to leave that evening, a black luxury car suddenly pulled through the estate gates. Not one of Damien's. A city government vehicle. Marco frowned immediately. One of Damien's security staff walked quickly toward him. They weren't invited. Damien's expression became unreadable. The rear door opened. A polished black shoe stepped onto the gravel. Mayor Victor Harrington had arrived, unannounced. The black sedan rolled to a slow stop at the edge of the garden. Its polished surface reflected rows of blooming white roses, making the expensive vehicle look strangely out of place among the flowers. Conversations gradually faded. Children stopped chasing one another across the lawn. Even the musicians lowered their instruments. Everyone looked toward the unfamiliar car. The rear door opened. Mayor Victor Harrington stepped out wearing an immaculate navy suit and a practiced campaign smile. He looked around as though he had been invited. He hadn't. Marco quietly moved closer to Damien. Would you like us to escort him out? Damien didn't answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the mayor. Finally he spoke. No. Marco looked surprised. We'll let him walk. A pause. Sometimes people reveal more when no one stops them. Marco nodded once. He understood. Victor adjusted his jacket before making his way toward the gathering. Several guests recognized him and politely greeted him. He smiled, shook hands, posed for 2 quick photographs with supporters who had happened to be nearby. Then his eyes found Damien. He spread his arms warmly. Mr. Romano. His voice carried across the garden. What a pleasant surprise. Damien simply waited. Victor continued walking, until only a few feet separated them. I heard your family was hosting a private gathering. He smiled. I thought I'd stop by to personally thank you for supporting the city's charitable initiatives. No one answered. The silence became noticeably uncomfortable. Finally, Damien spoke. This is a family memorial. Victor's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I wasn't aware. No, Damien replied calmly. You weren't. The mayor cleared his throat. My apologies. He glanced around, searching for a way to recover. His eyes landed on the floral arrangements surrounding the pavilion. They're magnificent. He nodded approvingly. You always choose the finest designers. Before Damien could respond, Emma stepped from behind a row of hydrangeas carrying a watering can. Victor saw her. His expression froze. You. The single word slipped out before he could stop himself. Emma paused politely. Good afternoon, Mayor. Several nearby guests looked between them. Victor forced another smile. I didn't realize you were. He searched for a suitable phrase. Working here? Emma answered calmly. I'm the florist. Damien quietly corrected him. She's our guest. Another silence followed. Victor laughed awkwardly. Of course. He looked around at the guests. I've always admired local businesses. Emma said nothing. She simply continued watering a nearby arrangement. Victor suddenly realized something uncomfortable. Not one person in the garden was laughing with him. No cameras surrounded him. No applause followed his words. Only birdsong. He cleared his throat again. I won't interrupt your gathering. Damien inclined his head once. Thank you. Victor turned back toward his car. For the first time in years, he walked away from a conversation feeling smaller than when he had entered it. No one had insulted him. No one had argued. They simply hadn't needed him. After the sedan disappeared beyond the estate gates, the children resumed playing. Conversations returned. Music drifted across the gardens once again. Emma quietly continued arranging flowers as though nothing unusual had happened. Damien watched her for a moment. You weren't angry. Emma smiled faintly. I've spent too much of my life giving anger free rent. He considered that. Does it still hurt? She didn't pretend otherwise. Yes. A pause. But hurting isn't the same as surrendering. Damien nodded slowly. No, it isn't. The afternoon ended peacefully. Before Emma left, Isabella hugged her tightly once more. You have to come back. Emma laughed. I thought today was work. It stopped being work around lunchtime. Emma smiled. I'd like that. Damien walked her to her truck. Neither seemed eager to end the conversation. Finally, he spoke. My mother would have liked you. Emma looked down modestly. I wish I could have met her. So do I. He stepped back as she climbed into the driver's seat. The old pickup engine started on the second attempt. Emma rolled down the window. Thank you. She hesitated. For today. Damien answered quietly. No. He looked toward the gardens. Thank you for bringing them back to life. Emma drove away smiling. She didn't notice Marco watching Damien from the porch. You look happier, Marco observed. Damien watched the pickup disappear beyond the trees. The garden does. Marco smiled knowingly. I wasn't talking about the garden. Damien didn't answer. He didn't need to. 2 days later, reality returned. Emma unlocked Brooke's flower house, expecting another ordinary morning. Instead, she found 3 unopened delivery notices taped to the front door. Each came from a different flower wholesaler. She frowned. That had never happened before. She called the first supplier immediately. A familiar representative answered. Good morning, Brooke's Flower House. Hi, David. Emma smiled politely. I received a delivery cancellation. A long pause followed. I'm sorry, Emma. So am I. She laughed nervously. There must be a mistake. Another silence. Then, "We've been instructed to discontinue your account." Emma blinked. "Discontinue? I'm afraid so. Did I miss payments? No. Did I violate our contract? No. Then why?" David hesitated. "I can't say." The line went quiet. Emma thanked him anyway before hanging up. She immediately called the second supplier. Then the third. The answers were almost identical. "We're unable to continue doing business. It's a management decision. We sincerely apologize." No one explained further. By lunchtime, every major flower wholesaler in the region had refused future deliveries. Lily stared at the growing list of canceled accounts. "This isn't coincidence." Emma slowly lowered the final phone. "No, it isn't." Lily folded her arms. "The mayor." Emma looked toward the shop window. Outside, customers continued walking past without realizing anything had changed. "We don't know that." "We don't have to." Emma remained quiet. Deep down, she suspected the same thing. The consequences arrived immediately. A bride called requesting roses. Emma didn't have enough. A hotel requested fresh orchids. She couldn't promise delivery. A funeral home asked for white lilies. She had to decline. Every refusal felt like a small heartbreak. Not because she lost money. Because someone trusted her, and she couldn't help them. That evening, after Lily went home, Emma remained alone inside the dark flower shop. Most of the buckets stood nearly empty. She walked slowly between them. The silence felt heavier than usual. She rested both hands on the old wooden work table her grandmother had built decades earlier. For the first time since inheriting the shop, she whispered the words she had fought so hard not to say. "I don't know if I can keep this place open." The admission echoed softly through the empty room. Across the city, Damien sat in Marco's office reviewing investment reports when his phone vibrated. Marco answered first, then looked toward Damien. "It's one of our growers." Damien accepted the call. The elderly vineyard owner spoke without greeting. "Mr. Romano, I thought you should know." "What happened?" "The wholesalers. They've all stopped supplying Miss Brooks." Damien's expression hardened. "All of them?" "Everyone we contacted." A pause. "Someone made several expensive phone calls yesterday." The room became very still. Damien slowly placed the phone back on the desk. Marco already knew from his face. "The mayor." Damien didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the window overlooking the city lights. After several quiet seconds, he spoke. "Call every independent flower grower we work with." Marco reached for his notebook. "How many?" "All of them." "What do I tell them?" Damien looked out across the dark skyline. His voice remained calm. "Tomorrow morning, Brooks Flower House will not open with empty buckets." Marco smiled for the first time that evening. "I'll make the calls." Damien added one final instruction before Marco reached the door. "She must never know where the flowers came from." Marco nodded. "It will be done." Outside, night settled gently over the city. Inside the dark flower shop, Emma switched off the last light, believing tomorrow would be the beginning of the end. She had no idea that before sunrise, a convoy of small delivery trucks was already preparing to head toward Brooks Flower House, each carrying fresh flowers, each bearing no company logo, and every delivery order carried the same simple instruction. No invoice, no sender, just flowers. Emma arrived at Brooks Flower House just before 6 the next morning. She expected silence. She expected empty flower buckets. She expected another difficult day filled with apologizing to customers she could no longer serve. Instead, she stopped halfway across the sidewalk. 3 delivery trucks were parked in front of the shop. None of them carried company logos. Several workers were quietly unloading fresh flowers onto the sidewalk. White roses, garden peonies, hydrangeas, tulips, delphiniums, ranunculus. Buckets upon buckets of flowers she hadn't ordered. Emma blinked. Surely they had the wrong address. She hurried forward. "I'm sorry." She smiled politely. "I think there's been a mistake." One of the drivers checked a clipboard. "Brooks Flower House?" "Yes." "Emma Brooks?" "Yes." He smiled. "Then we're in the right place." Emma frowned. "But I didn't place an order. The flowers are already paid for." "By whom?" "I'm afraid I don't know." He shrugged apologetically. "We were only told to deliver before sunrise." Another truck pulled to the curb, then another. Within 20 minutes, the sidewalk had become a sea of color. Lily arrived carrying breakfast and nearly dropped the paper bag. "What?" She looked from one truck to another. "Is happening?" Emma laughed in disbelief. "I wish I knew." The workers continued unloading flowers with remarkable care. Each bucket carried a simple white tag. No supplier name, no invoice, only one handwritten word: Bloom. Inside the shop, every refrigerator filled once again. The empty buckets that had felt so discouraging the previous evening now overflowed with fresh flowers. Emma stood quietly in the center of the room, overwhelmed. "I don't understand," she whispered. Lily picked up one of the tags. "Whoever did this," she smiled, "knows exactly how to keep a secret." Business began almost immediately. Word spread quickly that Brooks Flower House had somehow restocked overnight. Customers returned. Hospital orders resumed. Wedding consultations restarted. Emma worked non-stop through the morning. She never stopped wondering who had made it possible. Every time the bell above the door rang, she secretly hoped the mysterious benefactor might finally appear. But they never did. Across town, Marco placed a folder onto Damien's desk. The deliveries were successful. No one asked questions? They asked. Marco smiled. The growers answered honestly. What did they say? Someone wanted the flowers to find the right home. Damien nodded. And Emma? Completely confused. The faintest trace of amusement crossed Damien's face. Good. Marco raised an eyebrow. You enjoy watching people wonder. I enjoy watching kindness arrive quietly. Marco sat across from him. She'll eventually discover it was you. Probably. Does that concern you? Damien looked toward the garden visible beyond his office windows. It would. A pause. If I were doing it to be thanked. Marco smiled. You're not. No. I'm doing it because flowers shouldn't disappear. Another pause. Simply because someone powerful became petty. That afternoon, Emma received another cream-colored envelope. This one arrived by courier. Inside was a handwritten invitation, not to a private family gathering, to something much larger. She unfolded the card carefully. The Elena Romano Memorial Garden, opening ceremony. This Saturday. Your flowers belong here. Emma looked puzzled. Lily leaned over her shoulder. Memorial Garden? Emma nodded slowly. I've never heard of it. Saturday morning. Emma followed the invitation to the outskirts of the city. Beyond rolling hills stood a sprawling public botanical garden she had somehow never visited. Fresh stone pathways curved through thousands of blooming flowers. New benches lined shaded walkways. Children planted seedlings beneath the guidance of volunteers. A brass sign near the entrance read, The Elena Romano Community Garden, open to everyone. No admission fee, no membership required. Just gardens. Emma stood silently, taking everything in. A volunteer noticed her. You must be Miss Brooks. She smiled. We've been waiting. Emma looked surprised. For me? The woman nodded. Mr. Romano asked that you see the garden before the ceremony begins. She gently guided Emma through winding pathways. Every section had its own purpose. A butterfly garden. A sensory garden for visually impaired visitors. Vegetable beds maintained by local schools. Quiet memorial spaces where grieving families could sit without interruption. Nothing about the place felt exclusive. It felt shared. Emma whispered, This must have cost millions. The volunteer smiled. It did. And it's free? It always will be. Emma looked around in disbelief. Who maintains all this? The volunteer laughed softly. Mostly volunteers. And Mr. Romano. She lowered her voice. Though he prefers nobody notices. As they rounded another corner, Emma froze. Dozens of familiar faces smiled back at her. Mrs. Whitmore waved happily from beside a rose arbor. The elderly janitor from City Hall watered lavender near the pond. Several nurses she recognized from the children's hospital were planting daisies with young patients. Even the teenage boy who had once nervously bought flowers for his first date now helped younger children arrange sunflowers. Emma hadn't realized how many lives had quietly crossed her own. They remembered her. She hadn't expected that. A cheerful voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Emma, the little girl from the gala, the one who had handed her the fallen orchid, ran toward her carrying a small watering can. I saved you a flower. She proudly offered a single white daisy. Emma accepted it with a smile. Thank you. My mommy says flowers help people feel brave. Emma laughed gently. Your mommy sounds very wise. The girl grinned. You helped her too. Emma blinked. I did? The child's mother approached, smiling warmly. You probably don't remember. You sent flowers to the hospital after my surgery. Emma searched her memory, then smiled. I'm glad you're feeling better. The woman squeezed Emma's hand. I'm alive. A pause. My daughter finally gets to grow up with her mother. Emma suddenly understood. The bouquets she had quietly donated over the years had traveled much farther than she ever knew. A soft round of applause spread across the garden. People began gathering near a small wooden stage. No banners displayed Damien's name. No oversized photographs. Only fresh flowers surrounding a bronze statue of Elena Romano, holding a basket of wildflowers. Damien stepped onto the stage. No prepared speech. No teleprompter. He looked out over the crowd, then quietly said, My mother believed gardens belonged to everyone. He looked toward children planting flowers in the distance. She also believed people deserve second chances. Another pause. Sometimes, flowers remind us before people do. He stepped away from the microphone. That was all. The audience applauded warmly. Not because the speech was dramatic, because it was sincere. Emma watched him from the crowd. For a man surrounded by endless stories of power and influence, he seemed strangely uninterested in attention. He spent the next hour carrying watering cans, helping elderly visitors onto benches, listening more than speaking. Children climbed onto his shoulders without hesitation. No security guard stopped them. Emma smiled to herself. The rumors had forgotten to mention this version of Damien Romano. Late that afternoon, as the garden slowly emptied, a local television reporter approached Damien. Mr. Romano. She smiled professionally. We noticed someone missing today. Damien looked at her. The mayor. She continued. Were city officials invited? Damien answered calmly. The garden was open to everyone. A pause. So yes. Then why didn't he come? Damien glanced toward Emma, who was helping a little boy plant his very first sunflower. Then he looked back at the reporter. You'd have to ask him. The reporter nodded thoughtfully. She had expected controversy. Instead, she received quiet dignity. As the sun dipped behind the hills, Emma prepared to leave. Before climbing into her truck, she noticed another tiny white tag tucked beneath the windshield wiper, exactly like the tags attached to the anonymous flower deliveries. She unfolded it. Only a single handwritten initial appeared. D. Emma stared at it for several seconds, then slowly looked back toward the memorial garden. Somewhere beyond the flowers, someone had finally left the smallest clue. Emma turned the small white tag over in her fingers. There was nothing on the back. No signature. No explanation. Just a single elegant letter. D. The same handwriting she had seen on the mysterious order card. The same careful strokes that had appeared on the anonymous flower deliveries. She smiled to herself. "So," she whispered, "I think I've found you." But instead of feeling triumphant, she felt strangely grateful. On Monday morning, Brooks' flower house was busier than it had been in years. The flower coolers were almost empty before lunchtime. Customers lined up near the register. Many had never visited the shop before. Some quietly apologized for believing the edited videos. Others simply purchased flowers without mentioning the past. Emma accepted every order with the same gentle smile. She never asked anyone to explain themselves. People often carried enough regret already. Around noon, Lily walked in from outside carrying 3 newspapers. "You should probably see these." Emma wiped her hands on her apron. The front page of the first newspaper showed the Elena Romano Community Garden. The headline read, "A garden built for everyone." Another featured children planting flowers. The third was different. A large photograph of Mayor Victor Harrington stepping into City Hall filled nearly the entire page. The headline beneath it read, "Approval ratings continue to fall." Emma quietly folded the papers. "I don't enjoy seeing people fail." Lily looked at her. "Even after everything?" Emma nodded. "I know what public humiliation feels like." A pause. "I wouldn't wish it on anyone." Across town, Mayor Harrington's campaign office looked nothing like it had only weeks earlier. The champagne had disappeared. The confident laughter had been replaced by tense whispers. Televisions played political commentary non-stop. Several campaign advisors argued over polling numbers. Victor stood at the conference table staring at a graph. Every line pointed downward. "This can't be happening," he muttered. His chief strategist remained calm. "It is." Victor threw the report onto the table. "It was one mistake." The strategist looked directly at him. "No." A pause. "It was one moment that showed people who you were." Silence settled over the room. Another advisor entered carrying fresh polling data. "We've identified the problem." Victor looked up hopefully. "What is it?" "The florist." He frowned. "What about her?" "People see her as genuine." The advisor hesitated. And what?" "They see you as someone who bullied a kind person." Victor clenched his jaw. "So what do you suggest?" The strategist answered immediately. "You apologize." Victor looked offended. "I already issued a statement." "A written statement." The strategist shook his head. "People don't forgive press releases." He slid another folder across the table. "You need to apologize to her. In person. With cameras present." Victor slowly understood. Not because he felt remorse, because he saw an opportunity. The following afternoon, 3 television vans stopped outside Brooks' flower house. Reporters quickly assembled cameras on the sidewalk. Pedestrians gathered curiously. Emma looked through the shop window. "What is happening?" Lily peeked outside. "Oh." Her shoulders stiffened. "The mayor." A black government sedan pulled to the curb. Mayor Victor Harrington stepped out wearing a perfectly tailored suit and an expression carefully rehearsed in front of mirrors. Campaign staff surrounded him. Microphones followed. Camera lights switched on. Everything had been planned. Everything except Emma's response. Victor entered the flower shop with a solemn expression. "Miss Brooks." Emma stood behind the counter. "Good afternoon, Mayor. I hope I'm not interrupting." "You aren't." Several customers quietly stepped aside. Reporters remained outside filming through the large front windows. Victor cleared his throat. "I've spent considerable time reflecting on our interaction at the gala." Emma listened politely. "I regret that the situation became..." He searched for a careful word. "Unfortunate." She waited. Nothing more came. Finally, she asked softly, "Is that your apology?" Victor blinked. "I beg your pardon? You said the situation was unfortunate." She smiled gently. "Not that your actions were." The silence inside the flower shop became almost tangible. Even the customers stopped browsing. Victor forced another smile. I think everyone understands what I meant. Emma shook her head kindly. No. A pause. I think words matter. The mayor glanced briefly toward the cameras outside. Then back to Emma. I came here in good faith. I'm glad, she answered. Then let's speak honestly. Victor's smile began to fade. I've acknowledged that mistakes were made. Emma looked at him calmly. Who made them? Another silence. His advisors shifted nervously near the doorway. Victor lowered his voice. This conversation doesn't need to become difficult. Emma answered just as quietly. I agree. Then perhaps we should continue privately. She smiled warmly. No. Victor frowned. No? If your apology arrived with cameras. She looked toward the television crews outside. Then it belongs where the cameras are. The campaign staff exchanged anxious glances. This was not following the script. Victor straightened his jacket. I came to repair the harm between us. Emma nodded slowly. I appreciate that. A pause. But forgiveness. She looked him gently in the eyes. Cannot be scheduled for television. The words landed harder than shouting ever could. No accusation. No anger. Just quiet truth. One of the reporters outside whispered, Did you get that? Every microphone pointed toward the shop window. Victor suddenly realized the moment had slipped completely beyond his control. He wasn't directing the conversation anymore. He was simply standing inside it. He tried once more. Miss Brooks, I believe everyone deserves a second chance. Emma smiled. I do too. Hope briefly returned to his face. Then she continued. But second chances begin with honest first sentences. Another pause. You've apologized for the situation. She spoke gently. You still haven't apologized to me. Victor opened his mouth. No words came. For perhaps the first time in his political career, he couldn't find the right speech. Emma quietly walked around the counter, carrying a bouquet of white daisies. She placed it gently into his hands. Victor looked confused. What's this? A gift, she answered. I don't understand. I know. She smiled. My grandmother used to say, flowers help people say the words they struggle to find. He stared silently at the bouquet. White daisies. Simple. Unpretentious. Exactly the kind of flowers he would never have chosen himself. Emma stepped back. I truly hope you find those words someday. No triumph. No sarcasm. Only sincerity. Victor lowered his eyes. For the first time. He looked genuinely uncertain. Without another sentence, he turned and walked toward the door. The cameras followed immediately. Not because they had captured a dramatic confrontation, because they had witnessed something much rarer. A politician who had arrived expecting control, leaving without it. Across the street, a familiar black sedan remained parked beneath an old maple tree. Inside, Marco glanced toward Damien. You planned this? Damien looked through the windshield at the flower shop. No. You knew he'd come. I suspected. Marco smiled. And yet you stayed outside. Damien nodded. This wasn't my conversation. Another pause. She deserved to win it herself. Marco watched Emma through the shop window as she returned to arranging flowers exactly as though nothing unusual had happened. She didn't just win, he said quietly. She never fought. Damien's eyes never left the flower shop. Exactly. That evening, news broadcasts replayed only one sentence from the entire encounter. Not the mayor's prepared remarks. Not the campaign statements. Only Emma's calm voice. Forgiveness cannot be scheduled for television. The words spread across the city. And somewhere inside City Hall, Mayor Victor Harrington sat alone in his office, staring silently at the bouquet of white daisies resting on his desk. For the first time in many years, he couldn't decide whether they felt like a gift or a mirror. 3 months passed. Autumn arrived quietly. The air became cooler. Golden leaves drifted across the sidewalks outside Brooks' flower house. gathering beneath the old wooden sign that Emma's grandmother had carved decades earlier. For the first time in years, Emma unlocked the front door without wondering whether enough customers would come through it. She no longer counted every dollar before ordering flowers. She no longer worried about losing the shop. The little flower store that had once seemed destined to disappear now felt wonderfully alive. The bell above the entrance hardly stopped ringing. Brides booked consultations months in advance. Hospitals renewed their weekly orders. Schools requested floral workshops. Even nearby businesses began decorating their offices with fresh arrangements every Monday. Emma accepted each opportunity with the same quiet gratitude she had always carried. Success hadn't changed her. It had simply allowed more people to find her. One Tuesday morning, Lily walked into the shop holding a clipboard covered with notes. "We have a problem." Emma looked up from trimming sunflowers. "A serious one?" Lily grinned. "The best kind." Emma laughed. "What happened?" "We've completely run out of Saturdays until spring." Emma blinked. "Already?" Lily nodded proudly. "Every weekend is booked." Emma looked around the busy shop. "I never imagined." She stopped herself, then smiled. "No," she corrected gently. "My grandmother imagined it." On the wall behind the counter hung the old black-and-white photograph of her grandmother, smiling with an armful of wildflowers. Emma caught herself looking at it several times that morning. "I hope you're seeing this," she whispered under her breath. Lily overheard. "I'm pretty sure she is." A little later, a group of children arrived wearing oversized gardening gloves and carrying tiny plastic watering cans. Their teacher smiled apologetically. "I hope we're not early." Emma's face lit up. "You're exactly on time." Every Wednesday afternoon, Brooks Flower House now hosted free flower arranging classes for children, retirees, and anyone who simply wanted to spend an hour surrounded by beauty. There were no registration fees, no advertisements, only flowers and conversation. Emma knelt beside a little boy, struggling to trim a sunflower stem. "Try holding it a little lower." She guided his tiny hands. "There." The boy beamed. "I did it." "You certainly did." Across the room, an elderly widower carefully arranged daisies into a glass vase, while quietly sharing stories about his late wife with a teenage volunteer. Nearby, two nurses from the children's hospital laughed as they learned how to braid ivy through small wreaths. The flower shop no longer felt like a business. It felt like a home. The front door opened again. No one looked up immediately. Everyone assumed it was another visitor. A tall man quietly stepped inside, carrying 2 cardboard boxes. Without saying a word, he walked toward the storage room. Lily glanced over her shoulder. "Oh." She smiled knowingly. Perfect timing. Emma turned. "Damien." He nodded once. "Morning. You brought supplies?" He looked down at the boxes. "So I was instructed." Emma laughed. "I don't remember hiring you." "You didn't." He placed the boxes on a shelf. "I volunteered." The children quickly surrounded him. "Mr. Damien." A little girl tugged gently on his sleeve. "Can you help me tie my ribbon?" He crouched without hesitation. "I'll do my best." Another child held up a watering can almost as large as himself. "Can you carry this?" Damien accepted it as though it weighed nothing. Within minutes, the man whose name filled business magazines across the city was sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, helping 6-year-olds arrange carnations inside mason jars. No one seemed impressed by his wealth. The children certainly weren't. To them, he was simply the tall man who listened patiently. Emma watched from across the room. She smiled to herself. "You've become popular." Damien glanced toward the children. "They're honest." "They are. They tell you immediately if your flowers look terrible." Emma laughed. "That's true. They also forgive quickly." A pause. "I admire that." As the afternoon came to an end, parents collected their children one by one. The flower shop gradually became quiet again. Only Emma and Damien remained. Lily smiled mischievously. I suddenly remembered I need to organize the back storage room. Emma looked at the perfectly organized shelves. Again? It's urgent. Before Emma could answer, Lily disappeared. Emma shook her head, smiling. She isn't very subtle. No, Damien agreed. She isn't. A comfortable silence settled over the shop. Sunlight filtered softly through the front windows, painting golden patterns across the wooden floor. Emma began washing flower buckets. Without being asked, Damien picked up a towel and started drying them. You don't have to, she said automatically. I know, he answered. You've said that before. So have you. They both laughed. After several quiet minutes, Damien placed the last bucket onto the shelf. There. Emma nodded. Thank you. He looked around the shop. I've been thinking. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. Another small smile. I've spent most of my life building companies. Emma listened. I've negotiated contracts, purchased buildings, managed thousands of employees. He paused. But, his voice grew softer. None of those things have ever felt as meaningful as watching this place every Wednesday. Emma looked at him carefully. The flower classes? He nodded. I've watched lonely people become friends here. I've watched children leave, believing they created something beautiful. Another pause. I've watched people smile before they realized they were smiling. He looked directly into her eyes. And every time, it begins with you. Emma felt warmth rise gently into her cheeks. You give me far too much credit. No, he answered quietly. I don't think I give you enough. For a moment, neither moved. Outside, leaves drifted slowly across the sidewalk. Inside, the only sound came from the old clock, ticking softly near the window. Damien drew a slow breath. There is something I've wanted to tell you. Emma's heartbeat quickened ever so slightly. She waited. I've met powerful people, he said. Brilliant people. Courageous people. Another pause. But I've never admired anyone. He smiled faintly. More than the woman who keeps giving beauty away instead of trying to own it. Silence filled the flower shop. Not empty silence. The kind that arrives when words finally find the right place to rest. Emma lowered her eyes for just a second. When she looked back up, she was smiling. Not shy, not uncertain, simply happy. You know, she said softly, you've helped me carry flowers. You've carried buckets. You've taught children. You've listened to people who needed someone. She stepped a little closer. I don't think you're quite as intimidating as everyone says. The corner of Damien's mouth lifted. I've heard that rumor. I don't believe it anymore. Emma glanced toward the small cafe across the street. Its lights had just come on as evening settled over the neighborhood. She looked back at Damien. Are you busy tonight? He answered honestly. I was. She smiled. And now? He waited. She took a quiet breath. I was wondering. A tiny pause. If you'd like to have dinner with me. For the first time since they had met, Damien looked genuinely surprised. You mean? She laughed softly. Yes, not a flower meeting. Not a charity event. Not a garden. Just dinner. Another pause. With me. He didn't answer immediately. Not because he was uncertain. Because he wanted to remember the moment exactly as it happened. Finally, he smiled. The same quiet smile Emma had first seen when he opened her forgotten notebook. I'd like that very much. Emma picked up her coat from the hook beside the door. Good. She switched off the lights one by one. The little brass bell rang softly as they stepped outside together. Neither of them noticed Lily peeking through the back storeroom window, grinning from ear to ear. Across the street, the cafe glowed warmly beneath strings of autumn lights. For the first time, Emma and Damien walked toward something that had nothing to do with flowers. and everything to do with each other. The little cafe across the street had only 12 tables. It wasn't fashionable. It wasn't expensive. The menu had barely changed in 20 years. Emma chose it for one simple reason. Her grandmother used to bring her there after long days at the flower shop. "It reminds me that beautiful things don't have to be grand," she said as they stepped inside. Damien looked around at the worn wooden chairs and handwritten chalkboard menu. "I think your grandmother was right." The owner looked up from behind the counter. His face immediately brightened. "Emma." He hurried over with open arms. "I haven't seen you here in months." "I've been busy," she laughed. "I can see that." Then he noticed Damien. "You brought company." Emma smiled. "I did." The owner extended his hand. "I'm George." Damien shook it. "Damien." George grinned. Anyone Emma brings through that door is already family. Without asking another question, he disappeared into the kitchen. Emma smiled. "He always says that. And does he mean it?" "He never says things he doesn't mean." They chose a table beside the window, overlooking Brooks' flower house. For a few moments, neither reached for the menus. They simply watched people passing outside beneath the amber glow of the streetlights. Finally, Damien broke the silence. "I've attended dinners worth more than most houses." Emma looked at him. "I believe you. I've never looked forward to one as much as this." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "You have a quiet way of saying very dangerous things. I've been told." She laughed. "I believe that too." Their meals arrived. Simple tomato soup, fresh bread, roasted vegetables, nothing extravagant. Yet the conversation flowed more easily than either of them expected. They spoke about childhood memories. Emma admitted she had once dreamed of becoming a painter before discovering that flowers felt like painting with living colors. Damien confessed that, as a boy, he had secretly planted vegetables behind the Romano estate because he wanted to surprise his mother with something he had grown himself. "They were terrible," he admitted. Emma laughed. "What happened?" "My mother thanked me as though I'd harvested a royal garden." "That's what mothers do." He smiled softly. "Yes. They see what we're trying to become." As the evening wore on, the cafe gradually emptied. George quietly turned the sign on the front door from open to closed, but never hurried them. Outside, light rain began tapping gently against the windows. Emma watched the droplets race each other down the glass. "You know," she said quietly, "for a long time, I thought kindness was something people took advantage of." Damien listened. "After the gala," she looked down at her cup, "I almost believed the world had become too loud for gentle people." She looked back up. "Then you returned a notebook." He smiled. "It wasn't much." "It changed everything." Damien rested his hands around his coffee cup. "I should tell you something." Emma tilted her head. "I already knew who you were before the gala." She looked surprised. "You did?" He nodded. "My mother kept flowers from your shop in our home." Emma blinked. "What?" "She never met you. But every Friday." He smiled at the memory. "Someone from Brooks' flower house delivered fresh flowers." Emma's eyes widened. "My grandmother?" "Yes. My mother used to say." He paused, hearing Elena's voice in his mind. "That whoever arranged those flowers understood hope." Emma lowered her eyes. "My grandmother taught me every bouquet should carry one feeling. Hope? Usually." She smiled. "Sometimes courage. Sometimes forgiveness. And sometimes," she looked at him warmly, "a beginning." Damien reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Emma laughed. "If that's another anonymous note." "It isn't." He placed a small, worn leather notebook on the table. Emma recognized it instantly. Her notebook, the one he had returned after the gala. She looked at him in confusion. "I thought you gave this back." "I did. I found something inside after I returned it." He opened the back cover carefully. Hidden inside the lining was a tiny folded piece of paper neither of them had noticed before. Emma unfolded it. The handwriting belonged to her grandmother. If you ever meet someone who protects your kindness, instead of asking you to hide it, don't let fear convince you to walk away. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I've never seen this. I don't think your grandmother intended you to find it too early, Damien said softly. The cafe became silent once again. Only the rain spoke now. Emma carefully folded the note and slipped it back into the notebook. Then she looked at Damien. My grandmother would have liked you. He smiled. I've been hoping you might say that. Weeks turned into months. Winter arrived. The first snow dusted the rooftops of the city. Brooks Flower House celebrated its busiest holiday season in its history. The Wednesday flower classes continued to grow. The Elena Romano Community Garden became one of the city's favorite gathering places. Families picnicked there in spring. Children learned to garden in summer. Neighbors gathered beneath autumn leaves. Even in winter, volunteers decorated the pathways with evergreen branches and lanterns. It became exactly what Elena Romano had dreamed it could be. A place where strangers remembered they belonged to the same community. Mayor Victor Harrington quietly announced he would not seek another term in office. There were no dramatic speeches, no public battles, only a brief statement thanking the city for the opportunity to serve. Several weeks later, Emma found a handwritten envelope waiting in her mailbox. Inside was a short letter. Miss Brooks, you once gave me a bouquet of white daisies and told me flowers help people find the words they cannot say. It took me longer than I expected. I am sorry. Not because it became public, because it was wrong. Victor Harrington. Emma read the letter twice, then carefully folded it. She didn't celebrate. She didn't cry. She simply smiled. Sometimes, the flowers really did work. Early one spring morning, almost exactly 1 year after the gala, Brooks Flower House opened as usual. The bell rang. Emma looked up. Damien entered carrying a single clay flower pot. No wrapping paper, no ribbon, only a tiny green sprout pushing through the soil. She laughed. That's not much to look at. Not yet, he answered. What is it? A magnolia. Emma smiled. My favorite tree. I know. He placed the pot gently on the counter. It grows slowly. So I've heard. But once it blooms. He paused. It keeps blooming for generations. He looked around the little flower shop. The old wooden shelves. The laughter drifting from the workshop. The photograph of Emma's grandmother. The life they had quietly helped build together. Then he looked back at Emma. I've spent years protecting buildings, businesses, people. Another pause. But there's one future. He smiled. I'd like to spend the rest of my life protecting. Emma's breath caught. She knew what he meant before another word was spoken. Damien reached into his pocket, not for an extravagant velvet box. Instead, he removed a simple silver ring. Elegant, timeless, just like the woman standing before him, Emma Brooks. His voice remained calm, though his eyes betrayed every feeling he carried. You taught me that strength doesn't have to shout. You taught me that kindness isn't weakness. And you reminded me that even broken seasons bloom again. He took one quiet step closer. Will you marry me? Emma laughed through tears. Not because the question surprised her, because it felt exactly right. She looked around the flower shop, at the flowers, at her grandmother's photograph, at the little magnolia waiting patiently to grow. Then back into Damien's eyes. Yes, she whispered. A heartbeat later, she smiled even wider. Yes. The children attending that morning's flower class erupted into applause. Lily appeared from the back room, pretending to be shocked despite the tears already running down her face. George from the cafe rushed across the street, carrying a tray of warm cinnamon rolls because he had somehow guessed what was happening. Isabella embraced Emma like the sister she had never had. Marco quietly shook Damien's hand before slipping back toward the doorway, allowing the family their moment. No orchestra played. No photographers crowded around them. Only laughter, flowers, friends, and people who genuinely loved them. Months later, the wedding took place in the Elena Romano Community Garden, beneath a canopy of blooming magnolia branches. Emma carried a bouquet woven from white daisies, garden roses, and sprigs of rosemary, not because they were the most expensive flowers, but because every bloom told part of their story. Children from the Wednesday flower classes scattered petals along the stone pathway. The elderly widower walked proudly beside the nurses who had become his closest friends. The little girl from the gala carried the wedding rings with absolute determination. No seats were reserved for status, only for family. And by then, family had become a very large word. Years later, visitors walking through the community garden often paused beneath a magnificent magnolia tree near the entrance. A small bronze plaque rested beneath its branches. It didn't mention wealth, or power, or influence. It simply read, "The strongest hands are the ones that lift others. May everyone who rests beneath this tree leave believing kindness is never wasted." Every spring, thousands of white blossoms opened above that quiet message. And just across the road, Brooks Flower House continued filling the city with flowers. One bouquet, one act of kindness, one hopeful beginning at a time. Because in the end, the moment that changed two lives forever was never the humiliation at the wedding. It was the quiet choice one man made, to stand beside a woman when everyone else stepped away.